Hi people, my name's Daniel. I'm an artist and a maker. Today I'm going to be focusing on Andy Warhol. We're going to be looking at one particular activity which will allow you to make portraits in a style very similar to his screen printing images. I'm going to put some images up here of his work to give you examples. But what we're going to be thinking about is not using screen printing, but using materials that you might have at home or you could possibly easily order online. Also, I'm going to give you different variations of ways to make these activities. So if you watch all the way through the video, you may see elements that I'm explaining at the beginning that link in really well with the end, and you can mix and match. I'm going to show a few different ways of doing the basic drawing and a few different ways of adding colour to it. But it's up to you to experiment and explore and change what I'm doing in any way you want. This is just a guideline to spark your creativity. Anyway, let's get on with the activity. So the first option is to use this, which is OHP paper, clear acetate. You normally use it for printers or for overhead projectors. If you don't have that, you might use a document wallet such as this. And what you're going to do is hold it up in front of somebody's face and literally trace through the paper using a permanent marker. So here I am drawing a face of someone who is moving quite a bit. So what's going to happen is the paper's going to move, the person's going to move, you're going to get quite a distorted, funny looking image. Don't try to do your best drawing, you're going for best ideas. And what's going to happen is what you end up with is going to look quite strange, and that is fine. It's worth doing it a few times possibly. So here I am holding the paper myself at the top and the bottom. Holding it at the top and bottom allows me to apply a little bit of tension to the overhead projector paper and allows the person that's drawing to be able to push harder against the paper and it not to flex so much. But still, I'm probably moving the paper up and down a bit. I'm moving my head a bit. You can see I'm also talking. I'll probably laugh at some point. So what's going to happen is it's not going to be perfectly neat. My top tip here as a drawer is possibly to close one eye. That will help you focus more on your drawing. Here, although we're focusing on faces, a lot of the Andy Warhol work does focus on groups of people and families, ideas of families. So here we're doing it with one person, but there's no reason why you couldn't work with a group, with one person holding the paper tight, another person drawing through it, looking at somebody who's standing at a distance. So you've got a full body or even a group of people that you're drawing through at the time. Once you've finished the drawings, it's worth just putting them against a piece of white paper so you can see them more clearly. Now for the first activity, it's going to be quite straightforward. I'm going to use permanent markers to colour in the drawing that we've drawn. Now what you might have seen there is I started drawing but flipped the paper over, and the reason is permanent markers on this sort of paper, when you draw over a mark done by another permanent marker, you erase the first mark. So I flipped it over so the black in this case is on the back of the paper and I'm drawing on the other side to the black lines. That means when I draw over it, I don't rub out any black lines, and at the end I can flip it back and the black lines are on top and much bolder. Don't forget when you're doing this, your drawing can be quite rough. Some of the Andy Warhol screen prints, if you look at them carefully, the blocks of colour don't perfectly line up with each other. There's gaps, or the black lines on top sort of overlap things. And also, don't forget to do the background. Now once you've done this, it's on transparent paper. The pens you're using will allow light through, so an ideal way to display this is to put it up against a window. Here it's a bit cloudy, so maybe not the best environment. Another option is to use coloured acetate or cellophane to put the colour on top of your acetate. So here what I'm doing is cutting out just random shapes and using sellotape to stick them down. You could use Pritt stick, but I find the sellotape, particularly this magic transparent tape, works really well, but I try to put as little tape down as possible. So I cut out many of the blocks first, and then I use tape to overlap certain bits of colour to stick them onto the background all in one go. So there's less tape than taping down each piece with lots and lots of pieces of tape. The reason is when you hold it up against the window, the tape does show a bit as well. And of course you don't have to hold them up against the window, you could just stick this down against the plain background like this white background to really let it shine through. But I do like to think of it almost like a stained glass window finish. Again, thinking about the Andy Warhol prints with the things not quite lining up properly, so bold blocks of colour. An alternative to using OHP paper or those document wallets is to trace it. Here I've tried it with greaseproof paper, or I've actually got a piece of tracing paper. And there's lots of different types of tracing paper. Some, like drawing film, is much more transparent, a bit more like the OHP paper that we started with. And here I'm using a permanent marker again, but because this isn't the OHP plastic, you could use any felt tip on this. I'm using quite a thick marker, so my lines are quite different to the ones on that original OHP paper. And I'm working quite quickly, just trying to sketch in the shapes. That was an Andy Warhol portrait, by the way, from the Tate collection. Another alternative is I've just got that on my iPad. Using the greaseproof paper or the tracing paper again, you can see through it. And then with the tracing paper, here I'm doing an option where instead of using cellophane or coloured acetate, I'm just using block coloured paper. There's absolutely no reason you couldn't do this with the OHP paper in the first place, the transparent paper that you trace someone's face with. You could just block colour in behind it. But obviously once you finish this, you can't put it up against a window because this colour isn't transparent, so the light won't shine through it. But I quite like it on this tracing paper or even the greaseproof paper, because what I'm doing is sticking the colour, bold colour, on the back, and you'll see that once I've blocked in all the areas, again like the Andy Warhol, just trying to be quite rough, things overlapping. Once you've filled in all the areas, if you flip your image around, so the black lines are now on top again, the colours are actually quite muted the way they come through the tracing paper, and that's an effect I really like. Here I've used one bit of A4 to really block in the background. There we go, Andy Warhol in some brighter colours. Another option would have been just to print out a picture. Here I printed out that Andy Warhol portrait from the Tate collection again, and I'm using just plain white printer paper. I've put the photocopy, the printout, against the window, the light shining through. That means when I put my plain white paper on top of it, the light shines through enough that I can see the image and trace it. Again, I'm using a thick black pen, but you could trace it with anything because you're working on normal A4 printer paper. You could even add paint or coloured pencils to something like this. But here, one of the great things about the plain white paper is going back and using that coloured acetate or cellophane to add the bold colours in. Really trying to make something look like a pop art piece. Really bold, really exciting, really extravagant. Great, well thanks for watching. I hope you found that inspirational to spark ideas for your creativity.